Welcome to the fourth and final webinar in this series on writing a paper. We've covered getting started, types of paper the JRA will accept, working with your peer advisor or supervisor, the structure of a paper, what goes where, how to work through the drafts to the stage where you're ready to submit your paper to the journal, and all sorts of other interesting items. So, to pull all this together, here is a brief review of the latter stages of getting a paper published, with a few tips along the way that will help you to succeed in finally getting it over the last hurdle and into print. So let us remind you about working with your peer advisor and how to improve your chances of getting your paper accepted, particularly once you are in the draft writing stages for your paper. I'm going to re-emphasize a few things we've covered all along the way, as these matter more and more as you get towards the end of the writing project. Firstly, and obviously, work with your peer advisor or supervisor all the way along. They're there to help you. Try to agree a timetable and keep to it. Also, try to keep in regular contact. A good turnaround time for you is probably 2 weeks maximum for any draft. That keeps things hot and rolling. If you get directions or suggestions, attend to them all. If you don't understand, ask. Probably best by Skype or other verbal contact. If your advisor uses track changes, tell him or her how you addressed the comments that were raised and whether you accepted changes that they had made. If you didn't accept a suggestion, then say so and why. After all, this is your paper and not theirs. Many decisions are a matter of judgment, and your advisor may not always be right. I've said this many times, but try to check your grammar. One way of doing this is to read aloud what you have written. Peer advisors want to focus on the content and not grammatical or spelling errors, or whether you have written what fits the JRA format. These things get in the way and prevent you getting the most out of your advisor. Try to use colleagues. No harm in asking someone to proofread what you've already written, especially in the latter stages. Other people can also be helpful. For example, someone who knows nothing about what you do will be able to tell you if your paper is easy to understand. This could be someone like a family member or an academic friend outside of the research office. Also remember that every time you make a correction, it is possible that you will make another mistake. So be careful to check your changes. One correction leads to another error more times than you would believe. Most papers will need to have 2 or 3 revisions. At each stage you will be sending the latest draft to your peer advisor, who will provide comments and expect you to address them. This goes on until you are both reasonably happy with the final draft. A few checks you might think about. Is your paper clear? So would a young graduate new to research administration understand it? Is your data defined properly? Are graphs and tables clearly labelled? Are they readable? Again, get someone to look at them and ask if it is clear what the figure or table is about. Is your paper set out properly? JRA has very strict directions about the layout and formatting of graphs and tables and column headings. Again, try to use their formatting right from the start. If you're a sprinter, i.e. you write a huge chunk of the time, then don't let this slow you. Rather, when you've got all the words on paper, go over it and fix up the spelling mistakes and formatting errors. Think about the accuracy of what you've written. Is it ambiguous or can it be misinterpreted? Your peer advisor should be able to help you in this area. Another question to ask is, have I put the right emphasis on the key issues? It is very easy to diverge from the main theme of your paper because other things also seem interesting. Of course, they may well be, but then they could become the subject of your second paper. Lastly, of course, is there anything missing that should be in the paper? Try to be critical with yourself. On the other hand, don't be too critical. Your peer advisor will soon tell you if your paper is not ready or has things missing. What I'm trying to say is that this is a team effort, and the more you can do to help your peer advisor to get to grips with your paper, the quicker and easier the writing process will become, and the outcome will be so much better. Eventually, you will reach a point where you and your peer advisor are reasonably happy with the paper. I say reasonably deliberately. By now, you will know the weaknesses of your study, and hopefully you will have addressed them, even if you cannot solve them. The point is that you will probably never produce the perfect piece of research or the perfect paper, and neither will anyone else. So don't be put off submitting just because you spot another thing that you think should be addressed. Too many good pieces of work never get published because people are perfectionists. I believe you should aim to be the best you can be and leave perfection to someone else. At this point, you're ready to submit your paper to the journal. As suggested before, just make sure that your employer is happy for you to submit the final version. The whole paper may have changed significantly since the last time your employer was advised of its content. Finally, before submission, guess what? Check and recheck your grammar, your logic, your references, and also make sure that your conclusions really do match the results and discussion. Reviewers do appreciate it if these things are done well. It demonstrates reliability and concern for detail on the part of the author, and also enables the reviewer to do his or her job more thoroughly and positively. He or she will be able to spend more time helping you to improve the final version. Anyway, when you're ready, you can submit your paper to the journal, again following the instructions given in the guidelines for authors. Okay, so what happens once your paper is submitted? The editor will receive the paper and send it to 2 or 3 people who have expertise in the particular subject area. They will then review it independently from each other and send their comments back to the editor. This usually takes around 3 to 4 weeks. The editor then compiles the reviews and adds his or her own comments, which are then returned to the author. Comments are usually one of 2 things. Some are required changes. You must do these before you can resubmit. Other changes are suggested. You should think about these and decide whether or not they will add to the value of your paper. The editor may give you some directions on what you need to do as well. Don't be surprised if you get a lot of suggestions for changes. This just indicates a good reviewer, and also that he or she thinks your paper is worth his or her effort to make suggestions for improvements. Most papers will need to have 1 or 2 revisions. Now a bit about reviewers. It is the job of the reviewers to maintain the quality of the papers published in the journal, so they will be checking everything and trying to ensure that every submission meets the journal standards, objectives and formatting style, and that the paper will help to advance the profession of research administration. In general, reviewers want papers to be published, and so they will usually be keen to make suggestions which will improve your paper. Sometimes their comments are easy to deal with, but on other occasions they may require more work from you. Most journals will reject material that is not relevant to their audience, but otherwise will try to get authors to tidy up their paper so that it can be published. Naturally, reviewers are busy people, so they do expect authors to attend to the simple things like correct reference formatting, paper structure and grammar. As I have already said, they are not impressed if a paper is submitted without these things being completed properly. So, to get your paper published, make sure you have attended to them. Now it is up to you to respond. Often the longest delay in publishing a paper is because the authors fail to respond to the editor's requests quickly. My suggestion is you send the comments to the peer advisor immediately and get his or her advice on how to respond. You may put your own suggestions forward, of course. Once your peer advisor has given you some feedback, you should try to respond to the editor's letter, having made the changes as soon as possible. There are 2 or 3 important things to tell you about responding. Firstly, you should attend to only what the referees require. If you start adding new material, this may simply delay the whole process. Trust me, you will be tempted, but don't do it unless you have made a very definite mistake, in which case you will need to tell the editor of the error and that you have fixed it. Secondly, it is a good idea to write a covering letter or email to the editor explaining how you have dealt with each of the comments. Just occasionally, a reviewer will get something completely wrong. They might miss a key point and direct you to add it when it's already there. Sometimes you will realise that the reviewer has misunderstood something in your paper, and a simple rewording may be all that is needed rather than a big rewrite which the reviewer may have suggested. First, ask yourself whether you have put the information in the right place and whether you were clear enough. Usually, you only need to make a small adjustment rather than the huge one the reviewer is suggesting. Your covering letter to the editor will then explain this, pointing out that the information is actually there and that you have either moved it or clarified it, so that the misunderstanding is cleared up. Of course, you shouldn't imply the referee is incompetent. Like everyone, they are doing their best, and they are doing it as an unpaid service to the academic world. It's even a good idea to thank them through the editor for their very helpful comments and for their thorough review. Once you've made your response, the editor will either accept your changes or send them to the reviewers for a second check or suggest further changes. Usually, at this stage, any further changes are minor, provided you have responded promptly and completely to the editor's requests. A word about the Author Fellowship Programme schedule. The cohort has a time limit of 6 months. This is to encourage you to keep going on the project and to give the peer advisors a finite responsibility. However, if you are nearly there, your peer advisor may well want to continue the interactions until the paper is finally submitted. That is up to them, of course, but it is always nice to report a success story. In conclusion, for more information or help with the programme, you have a number of options. Obviously, your first point of call should be your peer advisor or supervisor. You can also touch base with the member of the Author Fellowship Programme Committee assigned to you and your peer advisor. That would be the person who wrote to you to advise of your assignment to your peer advisor in the first place. You can also contact the journal editor or deputy editor, who are, indeed, the ultimate experts. And of course, if it would be helpful, I would also be happy to provide advice if you send me an email. My email address is on the PowerPoint. So, I hope you have found this webinar series helpful, and I am definitely looking forward to seeing your paper published soon in the JRA. And as before, we would really appreciate your comments and suggestions for improvements to this webinar series. Please feel free to get in touch with me if you want to discuss or disagree with any of the suggestions I've made, or if, based on your own experience, you think there are things you could suggest that would be helpful to others. We're all continually learning, and as members of the SRAI, we are all here to help one another. So, best wishes and blessings for from your presenter, Cliff Studman, and from the Committee for the Author Fellowship Programme.